My brother and mother arrived with a fake lawyer to kick me out of my own home, waving fraudulent papers for a $5 million property. So I let them finish their little performance. Then I called my real lawyer and the local police and set a trap they never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The call came on a Tuesday, the kind of gray, drizzly afternoon that seeps into your bones. I was already feeling fragile, curled up on my sofa under a weighted blanket, nursing the worst flu I'd had in years. My head throbbed, my throat felt like sandpaper, and every muscle ached. I was in that blurry, feverish state where the world feels muffled and distant. When my phone buzzed on the coffee table, I ignored it. When it buzzed a second and then a third time, I let out a groan and reached for it, wincing at the bright screen. It was my brother Andrew. "Hannah," he said, his voice dripping with a sickening, false cheerfulness I hadn't heard in ages. "Big news, Mom and I are in the area. We're swinging by the farmhouse in about 20 minutes. We have some legal papers to go over with you." I blinked, the fog in my head thickening. "Andrew, what are you talking about? The farmhouse? I'm sick." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," he scoffed, his tone instantly shifting from fake nice to his usual brand of impatient. "Just be there. We're bringing someone who is going to help. Streamline this whole inheritance thing. It's for the best." Before I could even process what streamline meant, he hung up. A cold dread, sharper and more chilling than my fever, cut straight through me. The farmhouse. My grandparents' farmhouse. The place I had poured my entire heart and a significant portion of my savings into. The place I had inherited, free and clear, 6 months ago. I pushed myself off the sofa, my legs unsteady. My profession as an estate appraiser meant I knew paperwork. I knew deeds, titles, and wills better than anyone. When my grandparents passed, they left the sprawling $5 million property to me. It wasn't a simple gift, it was a wreck. It was saddled with reverse mortgages, back taxes, and liens that would have seen it seized by the bank within a month. My mother, Margaret, and my brother, Andrew, had wanted nothing to do with it. "It's a teardown, Hannah," my mother had said with a wave of her hand. "A money pit, let the bank take it." Andrew just saw it as a problem he couldn't instantly liquidate. I took it on. I took a personal loan, liquidated my own retirement accounts, and spent 4 agonizing months in probate court, satisfying every creditor. I used my professional knowledge to navigate the labyrinth. 6 months ago, the new, clean deed with my name, Hannah M. Gable, as the sole owner was recorded by the county. I had saved our family's legacy. I hadn't told them when it was finalized. I just quietly kept restoring the old Victorian, room by room, my sanctuary. 20 minutes later, a shiny, unfamiliar luxury sedan crunched up the gravel driveway. My mother, Margaret, got out of the passenger side, dressed in her Sunday best. Andrew bounded out of the driver's side, grinning from ear to ear, wearing a suit that was clearly too expensive for him. And from the back seat emerged a man I didn't know, carrying a cheap-looking briefcase. He looked less like a lawyer and more like a used car salesman. They marched up to my porch, Andrew leading the way. He didn't even knock, just shoved the door open. "Hannah, there you are, you look terrible." "I'm sick, Andrew," I repeated, clutching my robe tightly. "Well, this will make you feel better, or worse. Depends on how you look at it," he said with a little laugh. He motioned to the stranger. "This is Mr. Peters. He's our legal counsel. Mom and I have been talking, and we've decided that this whole arrangement just isn't fair." My mother nodded, avoiding my eyes. "It's true, dear. The property is worth so much. It's not right for one child to have it all." I stared at them, the fever, the betrayal, and the sheer audacity of it all mixing into a toxic, dizzying cocktail in my head. They had abandoned this place. They had abandoned me when I was drowning in the debt to save it. And now, they were here with a fake lawyer and a smile. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The immediate aftermath of their arrival was a blur of mismatched, aggressive energy. My head was pounding, but their voices were sharp, cutting through the haze of my fever. Mr. Peters, the lawyer, stood stiffly in my entryway, his eyes darting around the restored foyer with a greedy, appraising look that made my skin crawl. Andrew, on the other hand, was all manic energy, pacing the antique hardwood floors I had personally refinished, his hands gesturing W. "Ildly. You've done some work," Andrew commented, tapping a hand on the solid mahogany newel post. "Good, good, that'll save us some trouble." "Us," I managed to croak, leaning against the doorframe for support. My entire body felt weak, but a new, cold anger was starting to build beneath the illness. "Yes, us, Hannah," my mother, Margaret, said, finally looking at me. Her expression wasn't one of concern for her sick daughter, it was one of impatient resolve. It was the same look she got when she was trying to return an item without a receipt. "Andrew has a new business venture, a big one, and he needs capital. This house, this land, it's the capital." "So you're just going to take it?" I asked, my voice small. "Don't be dramatic," Andrew snapped. "We're not taking it, we're reallocating it. Mr. Peters has the papers." The man in the cheap suit stepped forward and clicked open his briefcase. He pulled out a sheaf of papers with a theatrical flourish. "Ms. Gable," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone that sounded rehearsed. "We have here a motion to contest the probate ruling, based on undue influence and, unequal distribution of familial assets." My mind, though foggy, snagged on the words. As an estate appraiser, I knew the legal jargon. Undue influence, unequal distribution. The probate was closed 6 months ago. The contest window is long gone, and you would have had to be part of the original probate case, which you weren't. You both signed waivers disavowing any interest. Andrew's smug smile faltered for a second. He looked at Mr. Peters, who quickly recovered. "Ah, but this is a new filing," Mr. Peters said, holding the papers out to me. "A family settlement, see? Your mother as co-heir to the original estate." "She wasn't co-heir," I interrupted, my voice gaining a tiny bit of strength. "Grandma's will was specific. It was left to me. You both saw the will." "The will you probably tricked her into signing," Andrew shouted. "I was in a different state when she signed it, Andrew," I said, the cold anger rising. "I was in college." "Enough," Margaret said, stepping forward. "Hannah, this is how it's going to be. We are moving forward. This is what's fair. Andrew deserves his chance. We're giving you until Friday to clear out your personal things. The movers will be here on Saturday. Be reasonable." They stood there, the three of them, a united front of pure, unadulterated greed. My mother, my brother, and this charlatan. They were trying to steamroll me, counting on my illness and my accommodating nature to make me crumble. I just stared at them. I felt the heat of the fever, the ache in my bones, and the crushing weight of their betrayal. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw them out. But as I looked at the sloppy formatting on the papers Mr. Peters was holding, at the way Andrew couldn't meet my eyes, at the stubborn set of my mother's jaw, something in me clicked. I let out a small, dry cough, which turned into a laugh. It was a weak, wheezing sound, but it was a laugh. They all stared at me. "What's so funny?" Andrew demanded. I pushed myself off the doorframe, a new, icy calm settling over me. I looked past them, through the foyer, and into the dining room where my grandfather's old desk sat. On it was a simple, leather-bound folder. "Nothing," I said, my voice hoarse. "Nothing at all, you reminded me of something. You're right, we should be fair." I held up a hand as Mr. Peters tried to shove the papers at me again. "I'm not signing anything today, I'm sick. You said yourself I look terrible. Leave the papers. I'll have my lawyer look at them." My words were a lie, but they were the right lie. It was a strategic retreat. Andrew looked triumphant. "Fine, have your little lawyer look, it won't matter. These are solid, we'll be back. Friday, Hannah, be gone." They turned and left. I watched them pile back into the sedan, Andrew patting Mr. Peters on the back. The car spun on the gravel and sped down the drive. I locked the deadbolt, my hand shaking. I stumbled back to the sofa and collapsed, the adrenaline fading, leaving me weaker than before. I was alone, sick, and my family was trying to steal my home. But as I drifted off into a feverish sleep, one thought kept repeating in my head, a tiny, hard kernel of an idea. They were so focused on the inheritance. They were so focused on the will. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten what I do for a living. To understand my mother and brother, you have to understand my grandparents. They were products of the Depression, tough, frugal, and fiercely self-reliant. They built their farm and their fortune from nothing. My grandfather was a man who believed in sweat, and my grandmother was a woman who believed in sense. They loved me, and I adored them. I spent every summer of my life at this farmhouse, learning to mend fences, to balance ledgers, and to appreciate the value of a solid foundation. I was the quiet one, the responsible one. The one who went to college and built a respectable career as an estate appraiser, a job that required meticulous attention to detail and an understanding of value, both monetary and historical. Andrew was Andrew. He was the golden boy, the charmer. He could talk anyone into anything, but he never followed through. He was a black hole for my mother's money and attention. His life was a string of almosts. The app that almost got funded, the crypto that almost boomed, the startup that almost had a buyer. He was 33 years old and had never held a real job, always living off Margaret's dwindling retirement and his own inflated sense of impending greatness. My mother, Margaret, enabled it all. She saw Andrew's failures as near misses and my success as luck. In her eyes, the scales were unbalanced. My stability wasn't something I had earned, it was something I had. And what I had, I should be willing to share, or rather to give to Andrew, who needed it more. This dynamic had defined our lives. When my grandparents got sick, I was the one who managed their care, paid their bills, and held their hands. Andrew was too busy with a critical launch phase. My mother was too emotional to handle the details. When they passed and the will was read, I was as shocked as anyone. They had left me everything. The house, the land, the accounts, and the crushing mountain of debt they had hidden from everyone. The farmhouse was a $5 million property on paper, but in reality, it was a $500,000 liability. My mother and brother, upon hearing of the debts, had signed their waivers with breathtaking speed. "You're the appraiser, Hannah," Andrew had said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You figure it out." And I did. I liquidated my own assets. I worked with the banks. I spent every weekend for 8 months driving out to the property, hauling debris, and managing contractors. I had saved it. It was mine. Now, as I recovered from the flu, a cold, clear-headed rage replaced the fever. Andrew's new venture was clearly his most audacious. He wanted the $5 million asset, and he had convinced our mother to help him take it. He had even found a co-conspirator. This Mr. Peters, I had to know who he was. When they left, I had a moment of clarity. I didn't take the papers he offered, but as he'd held them out, I'd used my phone, my hand trembling, to snap a blurry photo of the letterhead at the top. It was just a glance, but it was enough. Peters Legal Services, it read, with a local address. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to a private investigator I'd worked with before, a guy named Mike who normally helped me track down obscure assets for complex estates. "Mike," I said, my voice still rough, "I have a weird one for you, a guy named Mr. Peters, claiming to be a lawyer." I sent him the photo. "On it," he replied. My second call was to my real lawyer, David Chen. David was the opposite of Mr. Peters in every conceivable way. He was sharp, precise, and had zero patience for nonsense. He was the one who had guided me through the probate nightmare. "David," I said, "it's Hannah, they're here." "I assumed they would show up eventually," David said, his voice calm. "What's their angle?" I explained the visit, the fake lawyer, the fraudulent papers, the Friday deadline. "Good," he said. "You didn't engage, you didn't sign anything, you didn't even touch the papers. Perfect. Now we let them build their own trap. You're an appraiser, Hannah, you know the value of a solid document, and you have the most solid one of all, the deed. They have a fantasy. They're coming back on Friday, David," Andrew said Saturday with movers. "Let them," David said, and I could almost hear the thin smile in his voice. "Let them show up. Let them bring their movers. In fact, I want you to be there, but you won't be alone. "We're not just going to stop them, Hannah. We're going to end this, for good." He was right. I wasn't just a victim, I was a strategist. I was the one who held the proof, the leverage. My grandfather had always told me, "Don't get mad, Hanny, get smart." My phone buzzed. It was Mike. "Got him," the text read. "Name's Arthur Peters. He's not a lawyer. He's a disbarred notary. Lost his license in 2019 for real estate fraud. He's got 2 pending cases against him for scamming the elderly. This guy isn't just a fake, he's a professional criminal." A chill went down my spine, but it was quickly replaced by a hot, sharp sense of purpose. This wasn't just a family squabble. This was a conspiracy to commit fraud. Andrew hadn't just brought a friend, he had hired a known con artist to steal my home. My trap was no longer just about defending my property. It was about exposing them. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in controlled burn fury. The fever broke, leaving me exhausted but wired, my mind as sharp and clear as a winter morning. I had shifted from passive victim to active strategist. The key to this entire thing wasn't just the deed I held, it was the trap I was about to set. David Chen's plan was simple, and that's why it was brilliant. "They are counting on you to be emotional, Hannah," he'd said. "They are expecting you to panic, to call them, to yell. We will do the opposite. We will be silent. We will be professional. We will be a brick wall." My investigation was already complete thanks to Mike. I had Arthur Peters' entire rap sheet. He was small-time, preying on people who didn't understand the system. That made Andrew's involvement even more sinister. My brother had actively sought out a criminal to defraud his own sister. The leverage was my deed, my stack of settled debt receipts, and my title insurance. But the trap was Andrew's own arrogance. He believed I was weak. He believed our mother's influence would be the final straw. He had no idea I had spent my entire career documenting, appraising, and protecting. I didn't wait for them to come back on Friday. That was their timeline, not mine. I had work to do. I spent Thursday setting up. I called the local police precinct, not 911 but the non-emergency line. I spoke to a Sergeant Miller, explaining the situation calmly and professionally. "I have a title dispute, Sergeant. My brother and his associates are threatening to forcibly remove me from my property, which I own. They are bringing movers on Saturday. My attorney will be present." I emailed him a copy of the deed, the finalized probate court order, and most importantly, Mike's report on Arthur Peters. The words disbarred, fraud, and pending cases did the trick. "Ma'am," Sergeant Miller said, his tone shifting from civil dispute to criminal matter. "You're right to call. Attempting to evict someone with fraudulent documents, especially with a known fraudster, is a serious offense. We can't intervene in a civil matter, but we can be present to prevent a breach of the peace and to act if we witness a crime in progress, like trespassing or uttering forged documents." "That's all I ask, Sergeant, just to be there. Saturday morning, 9 a.m. "We'll have a car there, Ms. Gable, don't you worry." Next, I called the moving company. Andrew, in his infinite stupidity, had used his own name. I found Andy's Big Move in the local listings. I called them not as Hannah, but as a concerned neighbor. "Hi," I said, pitching my voice up. "I'm calling about the move scheduled for Saturday at the old Gable farmhouse. My brother, Andrew, booked it. I just wanted to confirm the time." The dispatcher, bless her, was all business. "Yep, got it right here. Gable, 9 a.m. Saturday. Big job, whole house." "Wonderful," I said. He can be a bit disorganized. Is the payment all set?" "Oh, he paid the deposit, but he's paying the balance on site. Cash. He said the current resident might be a bit difficult, but that he had the legal papers to show her." "He certainly does," I said. "Thank you so much." So he was planning to pay the movers with my money after he'd sold my house. The audacity was breathtaking. I spent the rest of the day preparing the house. I set up a small, discreet security camera in the living room, pointing toward the front door. Legal on my own property. I put together a file, a very neat, very professional file. In it, I placed a certified copy of the deed, a copy of the final, closed probate order, signed, notarized copies of the waivers from Andrew and Margaret, disavowing all interest in the estate, the final paid-in-full statements from every creditor, bank, and lien holder, Mike's printed-out report on Arthur Peters, a new, crisp, no trespassing sign, which I hadn't posted yet. I felt powerful. The fever was gone, the fear was gone. I was an appraiser, and I had appraised the situation. The value of their claim was 0. Friday came and went. I didn't hear a peep from them. They were letting me stew, I imagined. They were letting me panic about their deadline. I spent the day drinking tea and calmly packing a small overnight bag just in case. Not because I thought I'd have to leave, but because I knew that after Saturday I would want a break. I'd go to a spa. I'd earned it. Friday evening, I was sitting on my porch, watching the sunset paint the fields gold and purple when my phone rang. It was Andrew. Well, he barked no hello. Well, what, Andrew? I asked calmly. Don't play dumb. Did your lawyer look at the papers? I'm afraid I was too sick to get them, Andrew. You never actually gave them to me, remember? You just waved them in my face. I heard him huff. It doesn't matter. You got the message. This is your last night. The movers are coming at 9. I expect you and your junk to be gone. Mom and I are being generous, giving you the weekend. And Mr. Peters, is he coming too? I asked, a little thrill running through me. Mr. Peters's work is done. He's on retainer, Andrew said, clearly puffing himself up. This is a family matter now. Just be out, Hannah. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I have no intention of making this hard, Andrew, I said, my voice as smooth as glass. In fact, I plan to make it very, very easy. Good, for once you're being smart. See you tomorrow, he sneered and hung up. I smiled, took a sip of my tea, and called David Chen. They're confirmed, 9 a.m. Excellent, David replied. I'll be there at 8. Sergeant Miller will be there at 8:30. You just relax, Hannah. The board is set. They just have to walk into the checkmate. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I barely slept, not from fear, but from a kind of righteous, electric energy. This was the moment I was taking my life back. This was the end of being the responsible doormat. The first confrontation was about to happen. I knew they were expecting me to be in tears, frantically throwing clothes into boxes. They were expecting me to be weak. They had forgotten, or perhaps never known, that I was my grandfather's granddaughter. And he never, ever backed down from a bully. When they showed up, I planned to be sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, as if I were waiting for a friend. My casual demeanor would be the first blow. My words, "You might want to read the name on the title again," would be the second. I had planned to say it on Friday, but this was so much better. Letting them show up with the movers. Letting them escalate this to a public, undeniable spectacle. It was a strategic masterstroke. I laid out my clothes for the next morning. A crisp, professional navy blue pantsuit. I was going to my own home, dressed not as a victim, but as the owner. The appraisal was done. The value was set. And my family's fraudulent claim was about to be proven utterly, definitively worthless. Saturday morning dawned bright and painfully clear, the kind of beautiful autumn day that felt like a mockery of the coming storm. I was up at 6, showered and dressed in my navy blue pantsuit. I felt like a general preparing for a siege, not a woman about to be evicted from her own home. By 7:30, I had a fresh pot of coffee brewing, and I sat at my restored kitchen table, calmly reviewing the file I had prepared. Each document was a bullet, and I had a full magazine. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, David Chen's immaculate gray sedan pulled up the drive. He got out, carrying a sleek leather briefcase, and nodded at me with a grimly satisfied smile. "Hannah, you look well, ready." "More than ready," I said, handing him a mug of coffee. "Good, Sergeant Miller just texted. He and Officer Rivas will be parked at the end of the road at 8:30. They'll be out of sight, but they'll be listening on a monitored line. They'll roll in the moment Andrew and his crew refuse to leave. It's the perfect legal trap setup. What about the movers? I asked. They're just civilians caught in the crossfire, David said. We treat them politely. We show them the paperwork. They will leave. Their company's insurance doesn't cover aiding and abetting felony fraud. At 8:32, a marked police cruiser drove slowly past the entrance to my driveway and parked on the county road, just behind a stand of old oak trees. They were invisible from the house, but their presence was a comfort. The next 30 minutes were the longest of my life. I stood by the living room window, watching the empty road. David sat at the table, calmly sipping his coffee as if he were waiting for a routine client meeting. At 8:59 on the dot, it began. First, a massive yellow moving truck, Andy's big move, rumbled up the long driveway. It looked absurdly large against the backdrop of the Victorian farmhouse. It parked in the middle of my gravel turning circle, and two men in matching jumpsuits got out, looking around confusedly. Seconds later, my mother's beige sedan pulled in behind it. My mother, Margaret, got out of the passenger side, already looking tense. And then, my brother, Andrew, emerged from the driver's seat. He was wearing his deal-closing suit, the one he'd probably bought with our mother's credit card. He clapped his hands together and strode toward the movers, radiating a false, booming confidence. "Morning, fellas," he shouted. "This is the place. We're doing a full clear-out." Then he saw me, standing on the porch. David Chen was at my side, briefcase in hand. Andrew's step faltered. His grin flickered. He hadn't expected me to be waiting. He definitely hadn't expected me to be dressed in a suit, looking like I was about to close a multi-million-dollar deal. And he absolutely, 100%, had not expected David Chen. He didn't know David, but he knew David looked expensive. "Hannah," Andrew called out, recovering his bluster. "Who's your friend?" "This is my attorney, Andrew," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the morning air. Margaret, hearing this, hurried over, her face a mask of indignation. "A lawyer? Hannah, you're making this so difficult. We're your family." "Which is why I thought I'd need legal representation," I said coolly. Andrew scoffed, turning to the movers who were standing awkwardly by their truck. "Don't mind them. She's just being difficult, like I told you. We have the paperwork." He marched right up the porch steps, trying to push past me. David Chen stepped silently in front of him, blocking his path. David was half a foot shorter than Andrew, but had the presence of a mountain. "I would not do that if I were you, Mr. Gable." "And who are you?" Andrew sneered. "I am David Chen. I am Ms. Gable's legal counsel," David said, his voice quiet but laced with steel. "And you are trespassing." "Trespassing?" Margaret shrieked. "This is our family home." "No, Margaret," I said, stepping forward. "It's my home, and this is the last time I'm going to say this politely. You, your son, and these gentlemen," I nodded to the movers, "need to leave. Now." "We're not going anywhere," Andrew shouted, his face turning red. "We have the papers. We have the court order. You're out, Hannah. You lost." He pulled a crumpled, familiar-looking sheaf of papers from his suit pocket, the same fraudulent documents from Mr. Peters. This was it, the moment of irrefutable proof. "A court order?" David said, his voice dangerously soft. "Please show me. I am an officer of the court. I am required to obey a lawful order." Andrew, thinking he'd won, shoved the papers at David. "See, it's all there. Motion to contest. Unequal distribution." David took the papers. He glanced at the first page, then the second. The movers were watching. My mother was watching. Andrew was watching, his chest puffed out. David looked up, his face blank. "Mr. Gable, this is a fascinating piece of creative writing, but it is not a court order. It's not even a valid filing. There's no case number. There's no judge's signature. This letterhead, Peters Legal Services, belongs to a Mr. Arthur Peters, a man who was disbarred in 2019 for real estate fraud, a man who has 2 pending cases against him for this exact kind of scam." The color drained from Andrew's face. Margaret's mouth opened and closed silently. But, Andrew stammered, "he's a lawyer." "He is a con artist," David said, his voice rising in volume, "whom you hired to conspire to defraud your sister, which is a felony. In fact," David held up the papers, "this document itself is an instrument of fraud. And by presenting it to me, an attorney, and to these gentlemen," he gestured to the movers, "in an attempt to steal this property, you have just committed a crime. In front of witnesses." "You can't prove that," Margaret cried, though her voice was shaking. "I can," I said. I stepped forward, holding my own file. "Andrew, Mom, you were right, I was being unfair. I should have been more transparent, so let's be transparent now." I turned to the two movers, who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else on earth. "Gentlemen, I am Hannah Gable, the sole legal owner of this property. Here," I handed them a copy of the front page of the deed. "That is my name. Here is the closed probate order, showing all assets transferred to me. And here," I handed them another sheet, "is the report on the man, Arthur Peters, who created those fake papers your client is holding." The lead mover read the page, his eyes growing wide. He looked at the disbarment, the fraud. He looked at Andrew. "Buddy," he said, "we're not doing this." "What, you have to?" Andrew yelled. "I paid the deposit. And you can have it back. We're not getting involved in this." He and his partner started walking back to their truck. "You can't go," Andrew screamed, running after them. "I'll sue you." "Go ahead," the movers shouted back. "But we're calling our boss, and he's gonna call the cops." "No need," David Chen called out, pulling out his phone. "They're already here." And on cue, the police cruiser, which had been silently pulling up the long driveway, flashed its lights. The sudden appearance of the police cruiser, its blue and red lights flashing silently in the bright morning, was the final, devastating blow. It was as if the universe itself had passed judgment. Andrew froze, his hand still outstretched toward the retreating movers. He turned, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief and panic. Margaret let out a small, terrified gasp and visibly shrank, her hand flying to her chest. Sergeant Miller and Officer Rivas stepped out of the car. They didn't rush. They walked with a calm, deliberate authority that was far more terrifying than any siren. "Good morning, folks," Sergeant Miller said, his eyes scanning the scene. David Chen in his suit, me in mine, the two movers paused by their truck, and Andrew and Margaret, who looked like they were abo. To be sick. Sergeant Miller, what seems to be the problem here?" "Sergeant, thank you for coming," David Chen said, stepping forward. "I'm David Chen, Ms. Gable's attorney. This is my client, Hannah Gable. She's the owner of this property." "We know that, sir," Sergeant Miller said, nodding to me. "We reviewed the documents she sent." Andrew's head snapped toward me. You called them. You called the cops on your own family." "I called them to protect my property from criminals," I said, my voice cold and even. "Which, right now, includes you." "That's not true," Margaret cried, finding her voice. She rushed toward the sergeant. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding. This is a family dispute. She tricked our mother and father. She stole this house." "Ma'am," Sergeant Miller said, holding up a hand, "we are well aware of the probate case. It was closed, sealed, and finalized 6 months ago. As far as the law is concerned, this is Ms. Gable's property. Which makes you," he looked at Margaret, then at Andrew, "trespassers." "But we have papers," Andrew said, his voice desperate. He held up the crumpled document from Peters. "A lawyer gave us these." Sergeant Miller looked at David Chen, who just raised an eyebrow. "Sir," the sergeant said to Andrew, "we are also aware of Mr. Arthur Peters. We've been looking for an excuse to talk to him again, and you've just handed us one. That document in your hand is fraudulent, and your attempt to use it to forcibly evict Ms. Gable in front of witnesses is a crime." The lead mover, now emboldened, spoke up. "Officer, he told us he had the legal papers. He told us to just ignore the owner, that she was difficult. He paid us a deposit to clear the whole house out." Sergeant Miller's eyes narrowed. He looked at Andrew. "Sir, I need you to place those documents on the hood of your mother's car and step back." "What? No, this is." "Now, sir," Officer Rivas said, his hand moving toward his belt. "Andrew, finally realizing that his charm and bluster were useless, shuffled over and slapped the papers down. "David," I said, my voice quiet, but in the sudden silence it carried. David Chen stepped forward. "Sergeant, my client is understandably distressed. She does not wish to see her family arrested today. However, she does want this to end permanently." He turned to Andrew and Margaret. "This is the deal. You are going to sign a document right here, right now, that I have already prepared. It is a full and final notice, acknowledging Hannah Gable as the sole owner of this property. It states that you acknowledge your previous waivers of interest, and it states that you will never, under any circumstances, set foot on this property or contact Ms. Gable again without her express written permission. It is, in effect, a no-contact order and a formal admission of trespass." "We'll never sign that," Margaret whispered. "You will," David said. "Because if you don't, I will hand these fraudulent papers, along with the report on Mr. Peters and sworn testimony from these two gentlemen," he nodded at the movers, "to Sergeant Miller. I will advise my client to press charges for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and attempted grand larceny. You, Andrew, will be the focus. But you, Margaret, as a co-conspirator, will not be immune. You will lose your retirement. You will both face a criminal trial." He pulled his briefcase onto the hood of Margaret's car, right next to the fraudulent papers. He clicked it open and pulled out a single, crisp document and a pen. "Or," he said, "you sign this, you get in your car, you leave, and you never come back. The movers will leave, the police will leave, and Hannah will be left in peace. The choice is yours, but you have exactly 30 seconds before I change my mind." Andrew and Margaret just stared at the paper. They looked at each other, the decades of shared entitlement and mutual enabling crumbling into dust. Andrew's big venture was gone. Margaret's golden boy was a common criminal. "Sign it, Andrew," I said. It was the first time I'd spoken to him directly. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred that was so pure, it was almost cleansing. He finally saw me. Not as his sister, not as a pushover, but as the person who had finally, decisively beaten him. He snatched the pen from David and scribbled his name. He shoved the pen at his mother. She, with tears streaming down her face, signed her name below his. "Get out," I said. They didn't say a word. Margaret stumbled to the passenger door. Andrew got in the driver's seat, his face pale and sick. He started the car and reversed so quickly he almost hit the moving van. Then he tore down the driveway, a plume of gravel dust rising behind him. The silence that fell after my mother's car disappeared down the road was absolute. It was broken only by the crunch of the mover's boots on the gravel. "Well," the lead mover said, walking over to M.E. and handing me a business card. "That was something. Ma'am, our boss is gonna hear about this. If you, ever need anything moved legally, you give us a call. And we're, real sorry about this." "Thank you," I said, taking the card. "You were very professional." They nodded, got into their big yellow truck and rumbled away, leaving me, David, and the two police officers standing in the driveway. Sergeant Miller came over, tipping his hat. "Ms. Gable, Mr. Chen, I'd say that was handled." "Thank you, Sergeant, for your presence. It made all the difference," David said, shaking his hand. "Just doing our job. Now," he looked at David, "about that Mr. Peters." "I've already emailed you his file, Sergeant," David said with a small smile. "Along with a copy of the fraudulent document my client's brother was kind enough to provide." "Excellent," Sergeant Miller said. "I think we'll go pay Mr. Peters a visit right now. Have a good day, ma'am." He and Officer Rivas got back in their cruiser and drove off. And then I was alone with David on the porch of my house, my home. I suddenly felt my knees go weak, the adrenaline of the past 3 days draining out of me all at once. I sat down heavily on the top step. "It's over," I said, more to myself than to David. "It's over," he confirmed. He snapped his briefcase shut, the click sounding like a judge's gavel. "They won't be back. That document they signed is ironclad. If they so much as text you, it's criminal harassment." "What will happen to them?" I asked, looking out at the fields. To Andrew and Margaret? Nothing from you. You gave them a gift they didn't deserve, a clean escape. But the world they live in, it's not so forgiving. Andrew will have to find a new venture. Margaret will have to face the fact that her retirement is all she has. Their team is broken. That's a worse punishment for them than any jail time. He was right. Their codependent, toxic bond was all they had, and I had just exposed it for what it was, a partnership in failure. As for Arthur Peters, I saw his name in the news a month later. He was arrested, and thanks to the new evidence I had provided, his other fraud cases were reopened. He was facing serious time. Andrew had, in his stupidity, helped bring down his own con artist. I, on the other hand, began to heal. I used the money I had saved for my spa day to instead install a new, state-of-the-art security system. Not because I was scared, but because it felt like a good, solid investment. I went back to my work, appraising estates, but something was different. I found myself taking on cases for elderly clients, helping them set up ironclad wills and trusts, teaching them how to spot predators like Peters and like Andrew. I used my skills to protect others, to give them the peace of mind my grandparents had tried to give me. My house, my sanctuary, finally felt like it was truly mine. It wasn't just an inheritance, it was a victory. I had saved it from the banks, and now I had saved it from my own blood. Every restored floorboard, every clean pane of glass was a testament to my own strength. I was no longer the responsible doormat. I was the owner. I was the strategist. I was the one who, when faced with a fraudulent claim, had the good sense to bring in a real lawyer, the police, and a truly magnificent, unassailable deed.